Hey, what's up, Yantaraj? You are on with Jan. Hey everyone, welcome back to On with Jan. Today I have the pleasure of introducing to you Dr. Jeffrey Guina. Dr. Guina is a licensed physician who is board certified in psychiatry, forensic psychiatry, and addiction medicine. With an extensive background in mental health, Dr. Guina brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversation today. But his expertise doesn't end there. In addition to his medical career, he is also a dedicated family man, balancing the demands of his profession with the joys and responsibilities of being a father of 6 children. Wow. And if that weren't impressive enough, Dr. Guina is a Sandan, a third-degree black belt in our martial arts organization, the Zenbei Botoku Kai International, demonstrating his discipline and focus outside and beyond the medical field. And currently, Dr. Guina is the Chief Medical Officer at Easter Seals and a Psychiatry Residency Director at Beaumont. Dr. Guina, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for talking to me.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. How did you go into medicine? How did you get into psychiatry? How did you get there?
Yeah, I was interested in psychiatry since I was a kid. I was just always really interested in how people's minds worked and why do people behave the way they do. And I was also interested in history, which has a lot to do with just human behavior and victories and tragedies, and I was also interested in science. And so when I learned about psychiatry as a job, I was just really drawn to this ability to kind of take physical science and social science and try to help people.
How long have you been working in this field?
So I have been, it takes about 12 years after high school to become a board certified psychiatrist. So 12 years of education and training post high school. And I have been a psychiatrist for about 13 years.
Wow, that's incredible. So with your job, who do you work with? What do you do? Go into that a little bit for us.
Sure. So I grew up in Michigan, and I went to Wayne State for med school, and then I was in the Air Force Reserves during med school, and then I went active duty for my psychiatry residency training. So I did that in Ohio at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Wright State University. And that's where you do rotations in hospitals and clinics. I worked with veterans. I worked in civilian hospitals and community clinics. And
So you've seen it all.
well, I don't know if I would say that, but you work with people in different settings with different problems. People who are depressed, people who are anxious, suicidal, drug and alcohol problems, people who have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, autism, and I really enjoyed working with service members and their families in the military. And then after 10 years, I left the Air Force and came to Michigan. I worked for the state of Michigan for a little while as a forensic psychiatrist. So I was working with people who were found not guilty by reason of insanity or incompetent to stand trial. And I was caring for them in the high security hospital in Saline, the Center for Forensic Psychiatry. And then I've worked at Easter Seals Morgue, which is a large community mental health organization. So we have clinics all over Southeast Michigan and in Flint and Grand Rapids. And we also do Oakland County Jail mental health services. So I like working with a lot of different people, and I particularly like working with vulnerable populations, people who've experienced trauma, addiction, people with developmental disabilities, and I enjoy teaching, and that's a big part of my job too.
Oh, wow. So do you work with kids? Do you work with adults?
So I'm not a child psychiatrist, but I have treated children and adolescents, and part of what I do at Easter Seals is oversee all of the psychiatric services. So that includes kids and adults, birth to earth.
Wow, I like the way you said that, birth to earth. So could you define what mental health is for all of us? I know that's a pretty hot topic now. And then if you want to add in anything or any misconceptions that people have surrounding mental health, we'd love to hear that.
Sure. So I think a lot of times when people think about mental health, they immediately think about like mental illness or mental disorders. But there's also a positive aspect of mental health of what we can do to stay mentally healthy and to, function at peak performance and take care of our well-being and those sorts of things. So I think that's a common misconception about mental health is that, utilizing um, mental health professionals like psychiatrists or therapists, psychologists, social workers, counselors. It's not just to cure the weary, it's also to strengthen the masterful, I like to say.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never thought of it that way. So it's almost like having a coach of a team or a sensei in the dojo, right? To get you to that peak performance, peak mental capacity, right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually we're seeing that a lot now. I was recently talking to people from the Detroit Tigers organization and Major League Baseball and other sports. They're really looking at bringing in mental health professionals, not just to deal with problems and prevention of problems, but try to coach and help peak physical and mental performance. And so you asked about the definition of mental health. To me, the definition of mental health is how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors interact to affect our life. And, thoughts influence feelings and behaviors. Feelings influence thoughts and behaviors. They all go in different directions. But if you have some unhealthy thoughts or unhealthy behaviors, those can affect how you feel, how you think, how you act, and they can, put you on a downward spiral. Or if there's positive thoughts and feelings, and behaviors, those can put you on an upward spiral too.
That's incredible. Thank you for teaching that to me today. That I never really thought of using mental health in the sense of having that peak performance. Because like you said, I think most people view it as a tool after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you can use it as a preventative tool. And that's pretty awesome to hear. So let's talk a little bit about what you notice is a common mental health hurdle, if you will, that people have to overcome. What do they do? And any insight you might have going that way.
Sure. I think there's almost two extremes that kind of happen with people who are having problems with their mental health. Um, One is to kind of normalize it or minimize it, or it's not that bad, or um, you know, I'm a rugged individual who pulls myself up by the bootstraps. I don't need no help from anybody, that kind of attitude. Um, which is particularly common, I think, among healthcare professionals. We like to help people. We don't always make the best patients, right? So I've provided care for a lot of doctors and other professionals and pilots in the Air Force, and they often have that mentality, and combat veterans. And
So you spend a lot of time pouring into other people, but who's pouring into you?
sure, right. Exactly. And so I think it's important for people to recognize when they need help or when they can be doing better, right? So that's kind of one extreme. On the other extreme, you often see people, there's almost been, and unfortunately, I think sometimes social media contributes to this, but this over pathologization of normal human emotions and behaviors. And I think we're seeing depression and anxiety skyrocket in the last few years. I think part of that is related to true stress and trauma, related to COVID, related to just the stressors of a busier world, and people being disconnected, and opioid crisis and suicide crisis and those things. But also part of it is, I think people sometimes lose a handle on it's okay to be sad and anxious sometimes. It would be strange if you never got sad and never anxious. And so sometimes there's people, I particularly see this with younger people who are like, I have an anxiety disorder. I have social anxiety disorder. And when we really talk about it, what they're saying is, well, I get self-conscious sometimes, or when I get at school, sometimes I don't like the way I look, or I think people who are talking about me. Well, that's normal, right? Those are normal things that we all experience. And then we hopefully, um, you know, grow and mature and the old sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Those kinds of things are there, are like time-tested principles of kind of trying to learn to manage those normal anxieties. But I think sometimes uh people take on this identity that something must be wrong with me. I must have a disorder. I must have an illness, and then that almost gets perpetuated, and that can cause dysfunction in their life.
Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think those normal feelings that a teenager would have makes them feel like they're not normal?
I think there's a lot of parts of it. I mean, I mentioned social media.
Yep.
Part of social media is people share posts, videos, pictures, and they're selecting what parts of their life they're sharing. And oftentimes it's something very positive, right? They're taking the best picture of themselves. They've taken 100 pictures and they're sharing the one that makes them look the best, right?
Of course.
And we all know that, but when you're looking through everyone's feed and you're seeing all the fun everyone else is having and all the great things they're doing, how good they look, and then you're not always having fun like that, you start thinking they're always having fun, they're always happy, they're always having a great time, and I'm not always like that. Something must be wrong with me. And I think that's part of it. That's a small part of it, and for some people a big part of it.
Absolutely, yeah. So they're just saying the highlight reel of everyone else's life and thinking like, "Well, that's not me."
Sure.
So social media is a big part. What do you think about how they're viewing their parents handling certain
Sure.
feelings, emotions, or how they handle their own kids?
Sure. So, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, of course. And in psychiatry, we talk about good enough parenting, because you're never going to get it right all the time. But hopefully you do it good enough that your kids can grow to feel safe and strong and capable and function in society, right? Um, I think sometimes with media also there's almost this presentation either of the ideal parents who are always perfect and never get it wrong, and they're never mad at their kid. And so when a kid gets yelled at about something, or gets their phone taken away or something, they feel like, I have the worst parents ever, they're ruining my life, right? um and if kids uh and so then it can create kind of this distorted view of what's normal and what's appropriate and what's not. At the same time, parents, there's certainly bad parents out there who are seriously negatively affecting their kids. And one of my big worries about that happened during the lockdowns is we know that even when society's functioning well, we miss child abuse. Teachers miss it, other adults miss it. And so when we shut down, especially the schools, we saw reports of child abuse go down, yet we knew from emergency room data and other reports that child abuse was up. People were stressed, and some people were trapped with their abuser, their spouse or their parent. And I think we're seeing the effects of that now. We'll probably see that for generations to come. And so we want to give. It's a delicate balance, because we don't want to over pathologize normal emotions and normal parenting discipline and things like that. But at the same time, we need to really pay attention to problems and protect kids and help parents be better parents too.
I like the way you said that. And you talked about abuse. There's physical abuse, but there's also mental abuse.
Absolutely.
How would you define that abuse and go into parenting with that?
Sure. So, so there's a lot of great studies on what's called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And they talk about 10 different kinds of of adverse experiences that kids go through. So there's physical abuse, there's sexual abuse, there's emotional abuse. Um, Emotional abuse is often, it's a little bit more of a gray area of what qualifies as that, but it could be name calling, especially chronic name calling, withholding of love and affection chronically, not allowing kids to ever express their feelings. It's one thing to say, you need to calm down, and we're ignoring this temper tantrum, but it's another thing to make children feel like they can never cry, they can never complain ever about anything, right? So but then there's also other adverse childhood experiences that are maybe less traumatic, but a parent with a mental health problem, or a parent who uses drugs or alcohol around the children. These things can affect kids and can affect them into adulthood. It can affect their mental health, their physical health, increase the risk of drug and alcohol use, increase the risk of uh, unemployment, government dependence, criminal justice involvement, all of those things. And so to me, child abuse is not just the biggest public mental health problem, but the biggest public health problem in the world. And if we can do better to prevent and to address abuse after it happens, I think so many societal problems and health problems would get better.
You mentioned helping parents become better parents. Do you have any tools that you advise to parents, anything that a parent could start doing right away? And maybe they're not an abusive parent at all. Maybe they're a great parent. They just want to ensure that they're giving their child the proper nurturing, the proper parenting with firmness and kindness wrapped into one.
Absolutely. So I think number one is, there's the analogy of you got to put your oxygen mask on before you can put an oxygen mask on your loved ones. And if a plane's going down, because if you run out of oxygen, now neither of you are going to be saved, right? And I think that analogy often applies to parenting, as we have to, as parents, we have to make sure we're taking good care of our own mental health, and so that we can be at peak performance for our kids. And so we're thinking through things properly and not letting emotions get the better of us. And we all do it. We all get mad, and we get mad in our romantic relationships and in our parenting and in our families. But then we also have to try to recover from that if we do or say the wrong thing, right? And so taking care of ourselves, I think, is really important. The second thing I would say is, people could probably Google this. There's kind of this 2x2 square of parenting. It's one way of think about different kinds of parents. And on one side, there's an axis of support. And on another side, there's an axis of expectations. And so if you're a parent who provides low support and low expectations to your kids, you might be neglectful, right?
Absolutely.
If you're providing high support but low expectations, you're probably being permissive, and your kid won't be as successful in life. They'll feel supported and loved, but they won't know how to get through the tough times, perhaps. And then if you're providing high expectations but low support, you're probably being very perfectionistic and demanding of your kids, and that might affect their development as well, right? But if you can match high expectations with high support, that is the most effective way of parenting a kid. Instead of being authoritarian, high expectations and low support, you're being authoritative, which is the ideal parenting style, that the kids know they're loved, but they also know there's rules, and they have to have a certain level of behavior. And they know when they screw up, they'll be loved still too. But they don't get out scot-free. And that's a hard balance to have, but it's essential.
And that would almost be kind of similar to how teachers would be with their students, right? Like you're in
Absolutely.
a teaching position, and you would have to, I think, agree you have to have high expectations, but you have to have high support for your patients.
Right.
Because if you're not supporting them, but you have those high expectations, you're setting them up to fail.
That's right.
Because you're supposed to be guiding them through that process with support, love, and kindness. But also, like you said, if they get off that course, you'll be there to say, hey, you have to fix something, right?
Right, right. Yeah, and so that applies to parenting. It applies to a lot of people's work, whoever they're working with, anyone in a leadership position who has people report to them, teachers. That applies to the medical students and the residents that I teach. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. And you mentioned taking care of ourselves. So parents taking care of themselves before they can properly take care of their child to the best of their ability. What are some of those things that they can do to take care of themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, there's been a lot of talk about burnout and wellness in the last few years. And I think this is good that we're paying attention to this.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of people have focused personal wellness on pampering yourself.
Okay.
So, what I mean by that is, um, we're going to bring in support puppies to work. And so everyone's not so stressed. And we're going to do massages and we're going to take a break from screen time and we're going to take a me time. And all of that's great. I support all of that. I love puppies. It's great. But I think more effective than pampering yourself is parenting yourself.
Say that again.
More important than pampering yourself is parenting yourself.
That's a truth bomb right there.
So what I mean by that is eat your vegetables. Go to sleep at a reasonable time. Make sure you get enough sleep. Don't leave the TV and the radio and your phone on when you're going to sleep. Get exercise. Eat healthy foods. All of those kinds of things that we know we should do and we tell our kids to do, but we don't necessarily practice what we preach. And those kinds of things can keep us not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy too.
But that goes right back to the thing you said of high support, high expectations, and you can use that same exact model on yourself.
Absolutely.
So you can sit down and say, what are my expectations of myself? And am I supporting myself in those expectations?
That's right. And just like the expectations we hold for other people, for ourselves, we should also hold reasonable expectations. Maybe it's unreasonable to go from no exercise ever, and I haven't exercised for 20 years, to I'm going to do 3 hours of moderate to severe exercise every day. Maybe that's not reasonable, but maybe you start with, I'm going to walk around the block once a week. Maybe that's the reasonable way to start. And then you work up, depending on how it goes. But when we set unreasonable expectations for ourselves and our kids, we're inevitably going to fall short. We're going to be disappointed and then we give up. And so taking small bites of the apple until the apple's gone and working our way up, setting those reasonable expectations, ones we know we can do, ones are so easy it seems stupid to even set that goal for us. That's a good way to start.
Just whatever you do, take a bite of that apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single day. I love that.
Exactly.
Okay, so you mentioned self-care and you mentioned parenting yourself, which I think is such a huge and valuable statement because I think a lot of the time, like you said, we spend so much time on adding this thing on. Oh, I'm going to go get my nails done. I'm going to get my hair done. And all those things, like you said, they're great, but they're not enough and they're not conducive for the long-term mental health goal, if you will, right? Because how do you actually feel after those things? You might feel good for the first, 10, 15 minutes after it happens, but like internally, how do you feel? And you said setting those things up like habits, eat your vegetables, go for a walk, analyze how you actually feel so you can parent yourself better.
Absolutely. I think that self-awareness is really important. Being aware of how we feel, being aware of how we think, how we act, being aware of our strengths and our limitations too. And that can hopefully help us be kinder to ourselves too, so we can build off our strengths, but also realize we have limitations and sometimes you got to cut yourself some slack too.
And what if parents are having a hard time with their mental attitude, with being able to be a happy parent?
Sure.
What could they do?
Well, we're not always going to be a happy parent, right? If our kids are suffering, we're going to suffer. If our kids are doing things wrong, we're going to be upset, and that's okay, right? But we got to make sure that sprinkled in the sadness and the anger, that we're making sure there's positive connections happening. And it might be just watching a movie together. It might be going and playing catch. It might be going on a bike ride. It might be family. Let's do family games. Let's, any way to integrate that in, and as much as one-on-one time with kids as possible too. So even if it's short, 15 minutes a week, but each kid gets some one-on-one attention, I think is really important, really valuable for in both directions. You were just saying about all the things we do and all the things we get busy. One of the things I notice about myself and just people in general is that when you get really busy, the things that fall through the cracks tend to be the things that make you happiest. You get so focused on what you think you need to do, and then you miss your kid's dance recital, or you miss, your kid's baseball game, or whatever it is. And those things are important, and those things are important to you, and they're important to your kid. That doesn't mean you're always going to be to everything. That's unreasonable too. Your whole life doesn't have to be dedicated to carting your kids around from this activity to that activity 7 days a week. That's not good for you or them either. But there's got to be a balance. Some of that needs to be there. And there also has to be some quality one-on-one time. And there also has to be some alone time and some downtime. And all of those things have to be part of your life.
But we have to be aware enough, like you said, to recognize what might be getting all the attention and focus and energy, and what is slipping through the cracks and those important parts, and not missing those.
Yeah.
So as a parent, what are some of those things that you make sure you do with your kids, for your kids, that are non-negotiables?
So I make sure that we have activities that we do together. Karate is an example. I also make sure that they have organized activities that they do separate. My daughters dance and my son does wrestling. I don't do those things. And I think it's important that I'm not part of those things, but I do go and watch them do those things. And then I also think it's important that they have unorganized activities. And this is something that studies actually show has decreased substantially, and especially in the last 30 years, is that parents more and more are pushing for all free time to be spent in supervised, organized activities. And that is great. I mean, there's a reason my kids are in karate and dance and wrestling. I want them in organized activities. But when that's 24/7 of their free time, there is something lost to having unsupervised free play, especially outdoor free play. And when you ask a lot of adults about some of their favorite childhood memories, a lot of it is the ventures, the bike rides, going out in the woods, building a fort, these kinds of things that that are going by the wayside and being replaced by either so much time being spent and so many different activities. I've heard of kids being in 10 different organized activities, um, or on screen time. And that's it. And that unorganized free play is important for a lot of reasons. One of them being, if kids are always supervised, they don't learn how to take risks on their own. They don't learn how to navigate conflict with other kids on their own. And then when they become adults, they're going to get blindsided with taking risks on new things and navigating conflicts with people, because that's never going to go away. And so it's just really important that, again, balance, that we balance time with our kids, time apart from our kids, organized activities, unorganized activities. And generally that will take some pressure off of us and off of them too, when we let that happen.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of those things kind of overlap, right? Your self-care, their needs, your guys' needs together, and all of those things are all important. But like you said, and keep saying, it's the balance, being able to have a balance of all of those things. So what about children and their mental health? go into that a little bit, what you notice, what you see.
Sure. So studies show there's two big things we can do as parents, to concrete things that we can do to help kids' mental health. One is limit screen time. So studies show that 2 hours or more of screen time is correlated with depression, anxiety, suicide, substance use. So if we can limit kids to less than 2 hours a day of screen time, that is ideal. And fortunately, there's lots of programs out there that allow you to do that. You can set screen time and limits. There's parental controls that you can set. And it's best to start right away, because once you give freedom and then pull it back, it's going to be hard, but you got to do that at some point. And if you're not monitoring what your kids are doing and how much time they're spending, I don't care how good you think your kids are, they're up to something. I promise you.
Yes. And it's so funny that you say that because, and before I go forward, I challenge everybody listening to this to check their own screen time. And if you're an iPhone user, you'll be able to see just exactly how much time you spend per day on your phone. I had to put a screen time on myself, and not necessarily because I was just wastefully just sitting on social media, but there was a lot of time wasted for no reason on applications that really didn't need me to check them and really didn't need me to look at them at all. Yeah. So I set myself up for 1 hour a day, and that pretty much includes all the work I need to do or more. And if I need to do that, I do that. So that's such a valuable thing that you just said.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not just setting screen time on your kids. You can set it on yourself as well.
Parenting yourself, people.
Yeah. And so I think that's a big deal. And I think particularly the social media. So I have social media turned off on my kids' phones. In fact, my kids don't get phone plans until they're 16, which, there's a lot of philosophies on that. I think a majority of parents, from what I tell, give their kids phones in elementary school or middle school, it looks like. There's some people that say like the wait till eighth movement, wait till 8th grade. I would say even longer than that. So I do give my kids old phones that they have to connect to Wi-Fi in my house, and most of the apps are turned off, and it's mostly they can text me and other family members or friends that I manage, and they can listen to music, and that's about it. And that's pretty much mirrors what kids grew up with 15 plus years ago. Kids had phones and kids to talk to their friends, or maybe AOL Instant Messenger or something, and they had music. They were listening to Walkman or CD players or record players, right? Everyone seems to have this idea in their head that we have to have that phone, we have to stay connected all the time, and the truth is you really don't. And it's actually better often if you don't, and those kids can get a hold of you if they need to. And there's other devices to do that too. So one big thing is screen time, particularly social media. Actually, studies show video games, for the most part, aren't that big of a deal. But video games actually have a social aspect. People are talking to each other, but social media is actually less social than video games. And it's more about that kind of measuring yourself up to other people that we see causes a lot of depression and anxiety. I'm not saying video games are great. I don't play video games at all personally, but interestingly, it's not as much of a problem as the social media is. So that's one, screen time. The other thing is sleep. Again, I just can't overstate enough how important sleep is. How many adults are getting 8 hours of sleep every night? People say I can function on less, but, and perhaps there's some exceptions out there, but study after study shows about 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep every night, no more, no less, is ideal. You sleep more, you function more poorly. You sleep less, you function more poorly in a dark, quiet space. with no lights from your phone that's tricking your brain and thinking it's daytime, all of those things. For kids, it's 8 or more hours. For most of childhood, it's 10 plus hours that kids need. And so it is really important that the internet and the TVs shut off at my house. They're all set to shut off at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And so there's not even an option to stay up and play video games or watch TV. This is all automated. So there's programs out there that do this. And kids need sleep. They shouldn't be falling asleep during school. They shouldn't be staying up too late, and they shouldn't be sleeping into noon, even during the school year on a regular basis. It's just not good it's not good for our bodies. It's not good for our minds.
I was just going to say, it's probably not really good for your mental health either. One thing you mentioned, the video games, still though a 2-hour limit on those. Would you agree, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what studies show. I mean, people can, I think that's on average. If people want to set 3 hours or 1 hour, it's not, none of this is black and white, but it's more the concept, and if, maybe on Christmas, they get to play video games more or get more time, it's not a hard and fast rule. It doesn't mean your kid is going to fall into deep depression because you let them do 4 hours. But it is correlated. And it is important that we all know how easy it is to spend so much time on these devices.
So easy.
And there's other things that need to happen. Homework, friendships, sports, other things need to happen too.
And like you said, limiting that screen time, I think, takes care of some of those aspects. If you limit that screen time and they don't have the ability to sit there aimlessly on social media and stay in touch with all their friends 24/7, they can have a lot more of those organic moments.
Sure.
That they remember that are unorganized.
And you learn how to be bored. This is a lost art.
Yes, people sometimes will come into the dojo like kids and they start with, "Oh, I was so bored today." And I have never had that, like, I'm sure as a kid I must have, but I never just sit there and I'm like, "Wow, I'm bored." And I think that probably came because I didn't grow up with social media. I didn't grow up with having that ability to talk to my friends 24/7, play video games days on end. Because I think the more you play those things and do those things, the less exciting they get. And then it's just like you're in a cycle of, I get up, I check my phone. Sure. I mean, that's the first thing most people do. They get up and they look right at their phone. Sure. What would you say to that? Would you say do something else? Do you have a replacement?
Well, I would say, the way you can easily measure how addicted someone is to cigarettes, for example, is how many minutes they can go without smoking their first cigarette in the morning. And I think the same goes for phones. It's kind of hard because most of us set our alarms on our phones. So you literally touch your phone when you get up. And, some of us have our morning routines where we do, toilet texting or email checking or whatever. That's not necessarily, a bad thing, but I think it's just really important that we have time away from our phone. If at all possible, putting it aside when we're home. So, having family dinners is important, but the purpose of family dinners gets lost when everyone's checking their phone every 5 seconds. And when you have to put it on the counter somewhere else, you're just less likely to check it. And when you do that, you'll notice how often you think about it. And that should be scary to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to self-awareness, paying attention. So I guess the challenge could be for all of us is don't pick up your phone after you turn off your alarm.
Sure.
Go brush your teeth, go drink water, get some sunlight in your eyes. So you mentioned you being in karate, and talk a little bit about martial arts, the benefits that you've seen, the benefits that relate to mental health and children, and whatever else that you'd like to add.
Sure. So, I started martial arts over 30 years ago, and I joined because I wanted to be Daniel LaRusso and Donatello, and that's why I started. But why I stayed and why I continue to practice, the reasoning has evolved a lot. And I think for anybody who's been around martial arts, especially in our organization, there's just something special about martial artists. It's just a different group of people. The people who stick around, just, there's a level of motivation there. There's a level of self-awareness there, and a level of character there that you don't always find in just the average group of people, right? So I know that when I'm away from martial arts for a while, when I lived lived in Ohio, I just found a hole in my life, and I also just not that I was doing anything immoral or wrong, but I also just felt like there was something missing in my character even, and so I sought out martial arts schools, and I did some Krav Maga, I did some Muay Thai, I did some Salat, I did Manda Muda, I did just some BJJ. I did a bunch of different things. I went to a bunch of different schools. I never found anything quite like what we do
I love that.
in this organization. Um, you know, both the level of professionalism and character building and the level of skill. You can often find one or the other.
Yeah.
But finding both is a real treasure. And so I was so happy to return and then get my kids involved. And I think being a martial artist has made me a better psychiatrist. I think has made me a better father, a better teacher, a better person in general. And I want that for my kids. And I see that in my kids. My daughter, when she started at 4, couldn't get on the mat, and she's crying, and I had to support her, and the sensei had to support her and get her out there.
High expectations, high support.
But also have that expectation that, nope, we're not leaving. You're not getting to sit on the sideline. You're going out there. And, now I watch her, do katas in front of everyone by herself with confidence, count for the class, give pointers to other people even. And it's amazing to see that growth. And I think martial arts just facilitating that confidence, and discipline and focus and all of those things. It's just, it's hard to put in words how good it is for kids and adults.
Yeah, there's just something that martial arts, our organization, the way maybe we teach, we operate, that cultivates not just the skill, but also the character development, the personal development of people, regardless of age. So like you said, your daughter started at 4. Some kids start at 6. Some don't start till 16. And no matter what age they start or walk through the door, they're all able to benefit from those same things, no matter the level. And it's incredible to see that growth. Like you're able to see it with your own child, which is probably so incredible. Such a great feeling in your heart to say, like, wow, I saw her barely be able to step on the mat, and now look at that. Right. Like, what a transformation. As far as mental health, and going back to what you said about the parenting model, I think karate offers that to the T, right? Like high expectations and high support. When you walk into the dojo, you're going to be met with smiles, with a very warm welcome. You're going to get on the mat and you're going to go through, maybe a tough class, mentally, physically, whatever it might be. But you know that your sensei, your senpai, whoever's there with you, is supporting you throughout the way. They're there to guide you through whatever curriculum you need, when your test is going to be, all of those things. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect in the model?
Yeah. I think it fits in perfectly with what you were saying, that high support, high expectation. It also fits in kind of with that balance of organized and unorganized too. Even though, when you're in class, you have times where you're supervised and times where you go practice on your own, or that you're expected to go practice at home, right? So it mixes that. And it also has that there's social aspects where you're working with partners, you're doing team kata, you're sparring, doing self-defense, but there's also individual aspects where you are just trying to do your best, and kata. I think is my whole impression of kata has changed dramatically in the last, couple decades. When I was a kid, it was like, oh, you just got to memorize all this stuff. Now it's like the pursuit of excellence. It's the pursuit of unattainable perfection, and you're just trying to get better and better and better, and you're never going to get there and completely, but you can always make increments, no matter how old you are or how what your rank is. I mean, and someone can always come around and help you a little bit with moving your hand just a half inch somewhere else, twisting your body a little bit, and that kind of mindset of constantly trying to grow and get better, that can translate in so many parts of our life, and the discipline it takes to do that. I think it's so good for us. And I think it's the reason there are studies about martial arts, scientific studies about martial arts and mental health and physical health, and how martial arts can improve ADHD, can improve anxiety, can improve pain. There's actually an organization in Michigan. It's a worldwide organization, but headquartered in Michigan, called Kids Kicking Cancer, and it's run by a physician, and who's also a black belt, and he's done studies and they about helping kids with cancer, and pain decreases with as kids get more confident and more skillful, learn breathing techniques better. It's just amazing all you know how the focus on mind, body, and spirit can really affect people's lives in ways you might not expect. It goes way beyond a kick or a punch.
I you know I have no words to use to say about what you said that could even equal to how I feel about martial arts and how I feel about what you said, because 100% everything you said is so spot on. I started when I was 6. And when I first started, like you said, like you start for a totally different reason. I liked the Power Rangers,
Yeah.
and that was totally not the reason that I stayed. And I think that pursuit of excellence and, like you said, the discipline that it cultivates to be able to do kata, which is just a pattern of movements that you have to be able to complete with excellence. So proper breathing, rotation, speed. Sometimes it's really fast, sometimes it's really slow. And you have to be able to learn that, do it, and practice it over and over and over and over again. And that cultivates focus, concentration, discipline, and it helps you understand you a little bit better too, because there are a lot of mental things that you'll start to notice about yourself, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, because you get it's so common to just say, "Well, I know it. It's good enough. It's what. Come on, do I have to do it another time?" And I don't know the last time I thought that way. It's probably been years, but um, getting out of that habit, I think has helped me and have patience and discipline in other areas of my life as well.
How important do you think it is for a parent to support and help their kid overcome that feeling? Because, like you said, when you were younger, it was totally different than how you view it now, which is normal and natural. And it's a normal feeling for kids to feel like, I don't want to do this again. I have the kata down, because they don't have that perspective.
Sure.
So, how important do you think it is?
Yeah, it's tough. Again, it's a balance between expectations and support, right? And uh, I think you want to push your kid, um, but and to some degree you do need to lecture your kid and say explain these things to them. Kids won't fully appreciate what you're saying, but at least it planted a seed that eventually they'll understand what you're talking about, the discipline and but I think those messages need to be heard. I think, from teachers and from parents as well. And I think this applies to a lot of things, because you have you in math, no one knows how to do algebra on day one. And then but you can get these mindsets of, well, you're either good at it or you're not. I'm just not good at it. Well, no, you have to work at it. And that's the same with kata, and that's the same with driving, and that's the same with anything. And video games are set up in a way that it's addictive, so that people keep working on it. But this is exactly what happens in video games. People work and get better and better and better and better, and they go up levels, and they're building their character. But it's so much more important to build character in real life in the
Ooh,
same exact way.
that's incredible. I love what you just said. Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with that. That was phenomenal. You took my words away. That was great. No, I think what you said is so valuable about building character and overcoming that. But I think, you know, back to you got to parent yourself. And if you can't parent yourself, you can't expect your 7, 8, 9-year-old to parent themselves. So when they come to you with, I don't want to do it, or I'd rather stay home, or, any variation of an excuse, just because I've done this kata, I know this kata, like, why do I have to do this again? And having the parent understand where that's coming from and getting that child through and past that.
That's right. And I remember being a kid, especially as a teenager, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to karate. I don't feel like
Mm-hmm.
it. And my mom made me go to karate. And
Same.
and guess what? When I felt kind of sick, all of a sudden I felt way better after doing karate.
Yep.
And even though I'm like, oh, I don't feel like it today, I would have a ball and had a lot of fun. And now I see that with, my teenage daughter too. I mean, she'll say, I don't want to go, and why do I do this? And but and like sometimes the whole drive to karate is just
Mm-hmm.
pouting.
Yep.
Um and then I see her out there with a big smile on her face, hugging her friends, high-fiving before class, during class. Then the whole ride back, it's like, oh yeah, that was cool. And I did this. I wonder when I'm going to get my next stripe. And it's just, sometimes there's things we got to do that are good for us, and things we got to do that we don't like. And sometimes the things we think we're telling ourselves we don't like, it's really because we just want to sit on the couch and do nothing.
That's couch talk.
Yeah,
That's couch
yeah,
talk.
and we just got to get out there and do it. And it applies to so many things within karate and without a karate. Oh, I don't. I'm gonna go to the tournament, but I'm not gonna do kata, or I'm not gonna do sparring. I do it all.
Yes.
Do it all, and take the opportunity. And same thing at home. My friends are having fun. We're gonna go do something, and you're like, never mind. I don't feel like it today. It's summer break. Go. What else are you gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
Take advantage of these opportunities to be social, to get outside your comfort zone, to go places, to do things, and that's gonna make us happier and stronger.
What an incredible reflective moment, though, to have that drive with your daughter, and she's like, man, I don't want to go. Like, why am I going? To you watch her on the mat, to how lively she is on the drive home, and just saying, like, look, you didn't feel like doing it, but the discipline was that you did it anyways. And look how you feel about it. So, not letting those lazy thoughts, that couch talk take over of, oh, I don't feel like, doing my workout. I don't feel like eating healthy. I don't feel like going to karate, and just doing it anyway. Because I think it matters way more during those moments that you do it rather than every day that you want to do it because you want to do it.
We don't want to enable and train our children to give up on themselves and to avoid risks, or avoid challenges, or avoid just activity. Because if we do, it will translate into their adulthood. We're training kids on how to be an adult. And whatever we do as a parent, that's got to be at the forefront of your mind, is what I allow them to get away with is it's going to become a habit that they have for the rest of their life. And if your kids are doing something you don't like or you wouldn't do, um, you can't tolerate it. You gotta support them through it, and help them through it, because it will affect how they are as a partner, as a romantic partner, as a parent, as a worker, all of those things. And I've heard a quote before said that, you know, uh, you don't prepare the road for the child, you prepare the child for the road.
I love that.
And we got to do a good job of preparing our kids for the road, even the bumpy parts.
And there will be bumpy parts.
And there will be bumpy parts.
I want to touch on, now I'm not a parent, but I want to touch on this part, and I want your expertise, your feedback, and your opinion. Sometimes parenting is inconvenient. Would you agree?
Sure.
So, for example, your kid doesn't want to go to karate, and maybe you're like, this is my opportunity to stay home.
To not drive. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about, parenting yourself, setting the example for your child?
Yeah, and again, I think it goes to balance, because I think there's some parents out there who don't take their kids to anything and will look for every opportunity to get out of nothing, and their kids are just totally on their own all the time.
Low support?
Low support, low expectations. Then there's also parents who are running their kids every day, all the time. And it's not good for you, and it's not good for your kid. And to the point that you're going to get burned out, and then you're going to want to get out of it. So finding that balance of, these are our days together, as a family, and downtime. And these are the days or nights we go and do activities, and we do driving. That's the expectation for you and for them. And you hold yourself to it, and you hold them to it.
Yeah, so just being aware, I guess, right, of how you're handling a moment like that, because I think when kids try to get away with things like, well, I want to stay home, or I don't feel good, can I skip school? They also are slightly testing you. I mean, I know I did this just to see like what my parents, how they would react, how they would respond. Yeah. And so if they take it as an opportunity for them not to have to do the work, then I'm like, oh, like I know what works on them now.
Kids will do whatever you tolerate. And so if you tell them to do the dishes and they do a bad job on the dishes, and you're like, well, it's got to get done, so I'm just going to do it myself, the kid just learned they don't need to do a good job on the dishes. If you say they have to clean their room and they do a bad job, and you don't make them clean it, and then you pick it up yourself because I just need to get the house clean, and you're teaching them what they don't have to do. And so we have to have those expectations, and then their bosses, their spouses will appreciate that you set them up for success.
Yeah, and doing those things too goes right into mental health, because you're teaching them those small disciplines, which are going to make them feel good about doing them, which when they have the opportunity to do on their own, they feel great about it.
That's right.
And it's not just, a cycle of, I got to sit on social media. My parents don't expect me to do anything around the house, so I don't have to do it. I don't have any extra activities I go to, so.
And what you just said about feeling great about it, I can't overstate enough how important that is. People are looking to feel good about themselves because they're cuddling a puppy, or because of a picture on social media, or they got this many likes or whatever. But that's artificial and fleeting. And feeling good because you overcame something that was scary, or because you made it through something you didn't want to do, or you didn't think you could do.
Overcome to become.
Yeah. Yep. That's valuable. And the more we do that, and the more we use that muscle, the more kids will be able to grow up to be able to handle challenges and not crump or avoid.
And everything that you've mentioned, I feel like just aligns what we do in karate. And, I believe in what we do, and I love it. I love being a part of it, but I can also see such a huge benefit to everybody, myself included. I was a kid once, and everything aligns. Getting kids to see that they can do those small things, getting a child to see that they can earn that stripe by putting the work in, right? Just builds and builds and builds. And we then are able to have competent children with confidence, self-esteem, discipline, and all those other core values. Before we finish up, can you touch on a little bit of what you mentioned with the studies and the martial arts
Hmm.
and anything else you'd like to add in?
Yeah. There's lots of studies about karate, tai chi, and just the mental benefits that it can have. Um, you know, the I, I'm a psychiatrist. I prescribe medications, but I'm a biopsychosocial psychiatrist. There's some problems can get better with medications. Some get better with talking. Some get better with activity. Some get better. I often say exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant, and food is the most overutilized antidepressant. And there are studies that show that healthy diet and exercise can be just as effective as antidepressants. And for a lot of people, you need them. You need all of those things, and you need to attack it from all sides. But we know that when kids do physical activity, ADHD, the best treatment is medications that help stimulate the part of your brain to focus and control your behavior. But when you add that with physical activity, the gains, you know, quadruple. And martial arts is one of those activities that's been studied, and I think probably more than any other physical activity, sport, or anything that you can do, really requires that physical and mental focus in a special way. When kids are struggling with focus, with discipline, with controlling the behaviors, um, martial arts is an evidence-based treatment for those things.
I love that. And so it's more of preventing medication with movement.
So yeah, maybe you prevent medication, maybe it's with medication. It just depends. Everybody's different, right? But yeah, I think it's certainly harder than just giving someone a pill, but it can be just as impactful, if not more.
But that's the thing, I think, is somebody that might be having issues with focus and a parent wants to bring them to martial arts, to karate specifically. It's not always going to be your one size fits all solution. Like, there are going to be tough times because your child might be having to navigate how to focus and they're having a hard time. And so the parent might get pushback from the kid of, I don't want to go, or I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. And then it's easy for the parent to be like, well, I don't really know if it's working. But it's something that's going to work, not like a pill where you take it and you're good for a certain amount of time, right? It's going to take a lot of time, and you have to have that persistence and dedication with that. Would you say something to that?
Absolutely. And I would say, especially when it comes to things like depression or anxiety, or really any just negative behaviors, I've never seen a pill just fix that magically for someone. Time and energy and effort and changing habit, it takes time. There's two ways people learn: trauma and repetition. Trauma, unfortunately, can change how you feel and how you think and even how you behave very quickly in a negative way. But repetition takes time, and that's also how people can recover from trauma, is seeking that support and talking about it. And so just as trauma can change the brain and really bad stressors can change our brain, so can repetition in positive environments with positive relationships can heal our brain.
Which is going to take a lot of time, effort, and energy, like you said.
Sure.
And that repetition has to be repetitive enough, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. I think you've said some fantastic things today. So just to recap a little bit, it's important for parents or people in general to acknowledge what they need for their own self-care, for what makes them feel good, and not the artificial, fleeting things like you mentioned, right? But something that really makes you feel good, and you're acknowledging that and working on it. So sleeping properly, parenting yourself, limiting screen time. But then going into kids, we're setting expectations that they can fulfill because we are supporting them in that fulfillment. What else did we touch on that you would like to recap for us?
Just one thing that I was thinking as you were talking about is there's a part of our brain that there's several parts of our brain that are related to what's called reward. And the reward center of our brain is stimulated by things like drugs and alcohol. That's why people use them, because it stimulates that part of your brain. It makes you feel good. The exact same part of your brain is stimulated when you run a race, when you get a good grade, when you get a new belt. And those things are going to make us better people and have better lives and be more functional, as opposed to the artificial things that people are seeking because they're missing those other things. So the more we can find those positive, healthy, functional rewards in our life, and for each of us, it's going to be different. But and the more we can help our kids find what's going to stimulate their reward center, the better off they're going to be, the more they're going to know who they are and what they want out of life and what their goals are, and the less likely are they're going to be searching for that reward through drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever the unhealthy behavior is.
Sure. Wow. I'm glad you added that in. I think that's incredible. I think finding those things for yourself is so important, because you have to identify what makes you feel those things that's valuable and conducive to the end goal, which is peak mental health. But then being able to do that with our kids and being able to mimic that so that they know what feels good and what the okay things are to take part in, to do. And I think the other part of starting karate, doing a physical activity, paying attention to what your kids like, but also having that free time and giving them the time and space to just go do whatever they want in terms of making memories with friends and having a good time. I think all those things are so valuable, and thank you so much for being here today and taking your time, coming out this way to the dojo and sitting down with me. I think everything you mentioned is going to be incredibly helpful, and it was for me. So thank you for teaching me today, Dr. Guina.
No problem. Thank you.
And that concludes our episode today. So thank you for teaching me. Thank you for teaching the Entourage. We both hope that this episode has provided you with valuable tools and knowledge to nurture your own well-being and the well-being of your children. Thank you again for listening. Peace out.